Welcome back, lords and ladies, to Lord's Mobile Beginner's Guide. I'm your host, Aevatrex, and today we're going to be talking about gear and gear progression, because when you start the game, there is a lot of different choices that you can actually start using, and there are some good and there are some that I would suggest you stay away from, at least early on. So we're going to go ahead and touch up on that, and we're also going to go ahead and touch up on jewels and the ones that you want to go ahead and focus on, and things like how gathering can help your gear progression, as well as sigils. Now, as we go over to the workshop here, you can go over to all equipment and it'll give you a breakdown of all the equipment that you can get to choose from, whether that's the helmet, your main hand, etc. And you can scroll down and you can actually take a look at all the options. And one thing that you notice is as you scroll down, the level gets lower and lower. So at the very beginning, you're probably going to only be able to see some of the first weapons that you can see. What I would suggest you do at the very start is to try and stay away from any like war related items early on, just because you're gonna gain levels so fast that if you actually make like a Slayer sword or a Shadow Steel or any of these weapons or armors that are super low level, like in the 20s, etc., you're gonna get out of that very quickly. And so those materials that you use for these type of items are going to be wasted, because you're not going to be using these items long term. So any war related items, I would say wait until you're at least in the 30s or 40s. That's when maybe you can start working on that. But instead, what you actually want to focus on early on is equipment that's going to help you with your construction and your research, because that's going to be your main focus early. Now, the main two that I want to point out is two accessories actually. The first one is going to be this one, the Sentinel's Circlet, and this is going to be the main ones that you're going to use for your construction speed. At gold, they are going to give you 25%, but they're so useful even at green or blue, etc., just because you can use 3 of them. Now, as far as upgrading them, you are going to be able to use things that you can get from gathering. So if you take a look at this, right, you're going to need metal, you're going to need copper coil, and you're going to need linen for this one. And these are things that you get just from gathering. And early on, you're going to be needing to gather quite a bit, just because you're going to need a lot of resources. So you're kind of using that gathering aspect of the game to help you in not only boosting up your castles and your buildings, but making sure that you can start making some Sentinel Circlet. And remember that you're going to be able to wear 3, so you can work all of them up to blue and then purple, etc. The boosts are going to be great. The other one that I'm going to point out here is the Lunar Flute. Now, this is going to be essentially the research equivalent to the Circlet. And then, of course, this one's going to fall in the same umbrella. You can actually start gathering tiles, whether that's wood or etc. You can use the materials that you gain from that to create the Lunar Flute. Now, there are other items that you can actually use for research and construction that you're going to get throughout. And if you're ever wondering about that, you can always just check and see what kind of items you can make that will fall under that construction and the research boost. But those two are the main ones that you want to focus on, because they're going to give you the biggest boost for that. Then that is going to be super important early on. Now, here's a quick tip on using your workshop efficiently. If you're ever wondering what's the best thing to use for either construction or infantry attack, whatever it may be, right? You can go ahead and click on all equipment and pick on whatever slot it is that you're looking for, whether it's accessories, boots, etc. And then you can sort it by this filter that we have here on the bottom right. Now, when you go here, you can actually pick out a stat, whatever it is that you're looking for, whether that's construction speed, research speed, any sort of attack stat, HP stat, etc. You can filter it through here. And let's just say that I'm looking for the best construction gear that I can use right now. So I'll go ahead and click construction speed, hit OK, and now all the items that I see are items that give me construction boost. Now, if I want to take a look at the armors, I just click on armor and it'll give me the ones that actually have the stat that I'm looking for. And if there is for some reason one that just does not give you anything in that slot, it's just going to come up empty, you see? So if you ever want to find out what stat you should be using or what item you should be focusing on, that's a great way to filter it out. Here's another quick tip. As of the last update that just went live, now every day you can come over here to your workshop and go to where it says Forge Supplies, and here you're going to be able to get a free chest that will give you some free materials that you can upgrade your gear with. So every day make sure you come here, claim this free gift, and let's see what I get. There we go. So don't miss out. Every single day you can do this and it'll help you upgrade your gear. Now let's go ahead and talk gear progression, because I know that a lot of people are going to want to see what items they can go for, especially early on, and maybe later on when they start progressing more in the game. So I had to move myself a little bit, that way you can actually see all their items. But let's say that you're super early on and you want to build just something that you can actually use in battle, nothing too crazy. Now the type of items that I would suggest would be something like this. Now, as you can see, these items are more free-to-play friendly. These are items that most of the time you can just go ahead and start gathering and use some of that material to make. And the stats are actually fairly good. You can get it pretty decently early. Most of these are level 40, level 35. So, but like I said, by the time you get to the 35-40 range, if you want to start using some of these items to engage in more like attacks or defend, etc., these are some of the items that you can go for. And then once you start getting into the level 50s or so, then you're going to start using some of the more high-end items, and that should probably look something like this. Now, these are some of the items here that you're going to want to actually start focusing on early on. You don't have to wait until you get to level 60 to actually start upgrading some of these, because while level 1 through 59 is going to be quite a while, but mainly it's 59 through 60 that really takes a long time. By the time you get to 60, you want to have at least some sort of gear set ready to go, because that's the gear that you're probably going to be using till the end of the game. So make sure that you're focusing on this type of gear. And also, there is a pack that's called Material Madness that will let you upgrade all of these pieces all at once. So you can just focus on getting that pack and upgrading this gear. Now, there are some variation to this, but there's one thing that I want to point out, and there's something that I see a lot, right? When people are making this type of gear set, which is what we call mixed, which is a mix set is when you can actually use infantry, cavalry, and range together. The one thing I will say is to try and focus in army stats, whether that's army attack or army HP. Focus on items that'll give you those stats. I see a lot of people do something like this, where they'll put a drum and they put a vial, which are items that are very heavy cav and very heavy infantry, and they only give you those stats. And the reason why people do this a lot of times is because maybe they think that their cavalry is not equal to the infantry in range, or maybe their infantry is a little bit lower than their cavalry in range. The one thing I will say is, don't try to make your stats all super even. They don't have to be even. They don't have to be all 150 across the board or whatever it may be. One can be higher than the other. But you're doing yourself a disservice if you use an item that only gives you cav stats compared to an item that will give you army stats, for instance, right? So try to focus on that way, especially when you're talking about a mix set. Try not to use any item that is only one troop type, because at the end of the day, you're actually going to be losing stats because you're only focusing on one instead of the whole. Now let's talk about jewels and sigils, because that's also another big part of making sure that your gear is as optimized as possible. As you're getting jewels and as you're getting sigils, you want to go ahead and maximize how you use them and what items you use them on. If you're going to be jeweling something for your mix set, meaning that it's going to be what you take hits in, etc., this is the way that I would suggest you jewel them. You go ahead and you put an infantry attack jewel, a range attack jewel, and a cavalry attack jewel. It's going to be the best setup for you. Now, if you are going to be jeweling something for a blast, meaning that it's going to be only one troop type, the general consensus for that is going to be something like this. There is going to be a cavalry attack jewel, and then there's going to be two monster jewels that you're going to generally use. For cav, it's going to be saber jewel, a gargantua jewel. For range, it's going to be a range attack jewel, a worm jewel, and a grim jewel. And for infantry, it's going to be the infantry attack jewel, the terror jewel, and the Trojan jewel. Now, once you get a little further and you can use even better jewels, you start getting champion jewels and you can integrate it into that. But generally speaking, this is how you want to jewel your gear. Another big thing that I want to point out when it comes to jewels is that a lot of times what I see people doing is they'll use one gold jewel or maybe one purple jewel and they'll put it in one slot, but they leave other slots open. So they'll have that purple jewel in your helm, but your accessories will have no jewels whatsoever. Remember this, if you can break down one jewel that you can actually use in another slot, I'd rather you have 4 of the lower tier ones than 1 of the higher tier one. And here's what I mean exactly. Would you rather use a gold cavalry attack jewel that gives you 20% attack, but only in one slot, and have 3 slots open that are not being used? Or would you rather break this down, divide it into 4 purples, that'll give you 12% each? Now, if you do the math, that is going to be 20% versus 48%. That is more than double. So always keep that in mind. It's great to have a purple jewel, a blue jewel, even a gold jewel. But if you have some empty slots, it might be better to break down that jewel and use the lower tier ones, because even 2 purples is better than 1 gold. So always keep that in mind. Don't upgrade a jewel until you have all the other slots at least filled out, and try to use the best combination that you can get. And now we get to sigils. Now sigils is what you unlock through the sigil tree, and depending on the slot that you unlock, you can actually put this in your gear, and depending on which one you use, it'll give you a different boost. You'll have some that'll work only when you're attacking a wonder and a fort. You have some that will only work when you're joining a rally into a wonder battles. You have some that hides your gear. There's a lot of different sigils that'll do some very nice things, but the one main one that you would probably focus on the most is the pack attack, the wolf pack sigils. The wolf pack sigil is the one that you generally see the most, and this was the one that will actually help your rally leader be stronger when you're joining and they're rallying a fort. So make sure that you start getting as many sigils as you can. Get ready for it, because you're going to be wanting to unlock all of the slots, especially later on, because the more slots the better. And then once you unlock all of the slots for all of your gear, you can start putting it in all of them and getting a higher boost. Now here's a bonus quick tip. If you go over to your stats right over here, you can actually take a look at your stats and see what these actually mean. Now you'll see here where it says infantry attack, range attack, cavalry attack. You have a percentage on the left side, and then you have a percentage on the right side. Now keep this in mind. The percentage on the right side that is green, that is the stats that you have when you have your leader. That will take into account things like if you're in Fury, if you have your leader, etc. So your green stats are the ones that you currently have if you have your leader. Now on the left hand side is what I would call your base stats. If your leader ever gets captured, etc., then the green ones go out the window, and then now you're operating with your base stats only. That's why on the right it says leader deployed, because if you don't have your leader, that is no longer the case, and you're only going to be using the stats on the left. So always keep that in mind, because whenever you lose your leader, that's why it's very dangerous, because your stats are going to be much lower. Now that's going to be it for this week's Lords Mobile's Beginner's Guide. Now next week, we're going to be tackling heroes, and I love the hero aspect of the game, so I can't wait for that. And as far as gear goes, one last quick tip here. Make sure that you try to plan ahead as far as what gear you're going to be working on, because it's not very good when you work on a certain piece and then you find another one that's going to be better for you, and you end up with items that you're not really going to use. So plan ahead, make sure that you make the best use of your jewels and your sigils, and make sure that you plan your gear progression. But yeah, appreciate you guys for coming through, and until later, bye.